welcome onto my channel, everyone. I'm SquishableMoon, your shooting star alien with a ranch addiction and fewer brain cells than your common garden snail. In honor of Spooky Month, I'll be telling you some scary stories from my own life. They're not super scary or anything, but I still hope you guys will enjoy them. Important note, there may be mentions of sexual abuse or trauma from my childhood. If you cannot handle that kind of thing right now, please go and click off this video and maybe come back at a later time. Before we begin, if you have a true scary story about your own life and would like to share it with me and everyone else, please make sure to comment it below. Let's get started. Story 1. The Man. Unlike my other stories in this video, this story is told from my parents' point of view. I was around 3 or 5 at the time, so I do not recall this ever happening. However, I do remember the fear, and that to this day, I am still scared of the dark because of it. It was nighttime when it started. I was screaming, and not the kind of scream of a child wanting attention, but the kind of scream that filled you with fear, of someone being torn apart, of someone being so wrapped in their own fear they couldn't hold in the scream any longer. I was a sensitive child growing up, more often wanting to sleep next to my parents than in my own bed. Pretty normal behavior for someone of my age. I also had an older brother who had his own room as well. My parents told me that my screams were unlike any noise I had ever made before. Screaming and crying, even wailing. Even after my parents had come to calm me down, I would still be screaming and crying long after. Since I was so little, I wasn't able to truly convey my words yet. However, the one thing I did say while crying was, "The man, the man." And as parents would, when your child is so scared and screaming about some man, you would check the windows, you would check the closet, under the bed, outside the house. You would check every nook and cranny you could to see if somebody was preying on your young child. In my room, I had a window that sat above my bed, and my parents would keep it locked and the blinds closed. However, no man was ever found that night. And after calming me down, they would return to bed. This would not be the first and only night that I would scream. Every night for a week, I would wake my parents up with the same ear-piercing screams of fear about the man. My parents were freaked out, not being able to stop whatever it was that was scaring their 3-year-old child so badly. They even started to interrogate my brother, thinking that he was scaring me in my sleep or before bed. However, every night he was already fast asleep before my screaming started. However, one night, the screaming stopped. And ever since that day, I never brought up the man again. Now, I do not remember this at all. I don't know what had me so scared. My mom told me that they were scared so badly. They believed that either someone must have been trying to kidnap me in my sleep, or it was just really bad night terrors. There is another part to the story, but it has nothing to do with the man. But it was definitely the moment that I realized I was scared of the dark. This was some years later. And my dad wanted me to sleep in my own bed and had insisted that their friends were saying that at my age I should be sleeping alone. So one night my mom put me to bed. She would rock me to sleep in this old rocking chair and sing me songs and read me books. She'd wrap me in my blankets and turn off the lights before closing the door behind her. I remember trying my best to sleep. I remember wanting to do what my parents had wanted. I was a good child. I mean, I was a bit bratty, but I was a kid. I really did want to follow what my parents were saying, and I wanted to be a big girl and sleep in my own bed. However, sleeping in my bed wasn't very easy. I turned around, facing my window that was slightly askewed with the curtains. However, my skin started to crawl. My room was dark, but I remember the window allowed some light from the moon to peek in. But at some point, I sat up in my bed, staring into the darkness of my room. I would peek over my bed, checking the floor, waiting, watching. I was never scared of the boogeyman, but I remember how real my fear was looking at the floor where anything would be sitting and waiting to grab my feet as soon as I laid them on the ground, ready to pull me in and eat me alive. Even as a kid, I was pretty brave. I often stuck up for friends who were half my size, though I was a small child. I remember telling myself, be brave. And I hopped off the bed and walked backwards so I could keep watch on the darkness that was swirling underneath my bed. I reached the door, but to my shock it was locked, or at the time I had truly believed it was locked from the outside. I remember banging on the door and yelling for my parents, but there was no answer. Like I said, I was small for my age, and even using my tiptoes, I couldn't reach the light switch myself. I crumbled to the floor, my hands sore from hitting the door, and my body cold from getting out of bed. I was stuck in the darkness, too small to turn on the light, and too scared to return back to my bed out of fear of what may be lurking in the darkness underneath. I think at some point, my mom had come to check on me, the guilt taking over as she heard me screaming down the hall. I still remember crying into her shoulder, and to this day I can still remember the darkness of that room. I've gotten past some of the fear I had from when I was little, but darkness has never been one of them. And to this day, sometimes when I'm alone in my room, I still get this crawling feeling that something's watching me, waiting. Story 2. The Man in the Top Hat. This story takes place at my old house. In that house, man, I have a lot of stories from it, but we're only going to talk about a few today, because if I were to tell you every weird thing about that house, we'd be here for 5 hours. And like most stories, it takes place on a completely normal day. It was after school. I was in middle school or high school at the time. And after school, I would watch whatever was on TV. I grew up poor, so we didn't have the best cable television known to man, but we had a few channels. I'd watch TV while I waited for my parents to come home from work. That day I had been watching one of those ghost hunter shows. You know the one. A group of people enter an abandoned building like a school or hospital, look for ghosts and try to communicate with them and catch them on camera. My room was the smallest bedroom in the house, being up the stairs and to the right from the master bedroom that was on the left. To the left of the master bedroom was a large gaming room that I had used as a bedroom for some time until the room that I moved into was available. Down the hall to the right was my brother's bedroom and the bathroom door that I often left open. Since I was scared of the dark, I slept with the door open and the light on. I have also used night lights, but they go out from time to time. My bed was pressed against the wall so that my side was facing the open door of my bedroom. Something that I think is important to the story. I was sexually abused most of my childhood and teenage years by my half-brother. This will be important later, I promise. It was the early morning or the middle of the night, maybe somewhere around 2 or 3 in the morning. I was asleep, till I felt this crawling feeling of someone staring at me. The bathroom light was dim, and I rolled over in my bed to look at the doorway. And there, standing in the doorway, a darkened silhouette of a man stood. Their figure took up most of the door, and their hat touched the top of the door frame. They were completely pitch black, though I feel like I remember not being able to see their hands, being more see-through and transparent. I don't remember seeing their eyes, no white silhouette to show me that their eyes were even existing, but I remember the feeling of them staring at me, just outside my room. Now at the time, I thought it was my abuser, so I wasn't scared. In fact, I was more beyond belief. I grabbed my pillow, and I used my full force and anger to toss it at the figure, screaming to get out! In the blink of an eye, the pillow hit the wall and fell to the ground in the hallway. I was almost fully awake now, and walked into the hallway to grab my pillow. Everything was quiet. Everything was quiet in the darkness, the kind of silence that feels unnaturally quiet. I peeked into the staircase near my room, peering into the dark below, and there was nothing. I walked gently down the staircase to peek around the corner into the kitchen, and again around the other corner to look into our sitting room. Everything was dark. Everything was calm. There wasn't anything out of place. I returned to bed and went back to sleep. The next morning, I told my mom about the weird occurrence that had happened to me last night, when she turned around and gave me a shocked expression. She sat down and told me that my dad, the same night around the same time, had been woken up. He said it was as if somebody was sitting on his chest, choking him in his sleep. It felt like two hands were grabbing both sides of his neck, and the weight from someone sitting on him kept him in bed. But when he woke up, whatever it was gone. And to this day, we cannot come up with a single explanation as to why it would happen. Coincidence? Maybe. Or could it have been something more? Had I chased off something that wanted to do whatever it did to my dad to me? All I know is the dark figure in the top hat has always been on my mind ever since. Story 3. Sleepwalking while awake. It was a late evening, and my mom was cooking in the kitchen, laying out trays of freshly baked cookies. Sugar cookies, or snickerdoodles, I can't remember, but the sweet aroma of their sugary scent filled the room. I lay on the couch, taking it in, before falling asleep. The couch was a leather couch, black, and was quite cool in the summer, so I often liked to take naps on it. And once you're old enough that your parents can't carry you anymore, you would usually wake up where you fell asleep. Now, most kids have been known to sleepwalk, and I was no exception. However, my sleepwalking could have been a little extreme at times. This was one of the occasions that I woke up while sleepwalking. And it's to this day, I never want it to happen again. Now, I fell asleep on the couch. I remember waking up on the couch and standing up. And for whatever reason, I looked to the garage door that entered into the house. I opened the door and walked into the garage. Now, at the time, I didn't know why I was walking into the garage. I just remember doing it. I turned the corner in the garage, and there sat a large door that never existed in our floor plan. I had never seen this door before. I remember going up to the door, still a couple feet away. It sat on the wall where all our tools were supposed to be, completely out of place in the dingy garage. I remember deep inside me this fear welled up, and the door cracked open. Now, I can't remember if I saw what was behind the door, but I remember running full speed as the door creaked open, almost tripping over my feet as I entered into the living room where the couch was. But I didn't stop there. I ran past the kitchen, the cookies gone, my mom not there, even though I remembered her being there only a second ago. I ran into my parents' room and fell to the ground, hitting their bed. And just like that, I woke up. But this time, I was fully awake, and I had full control of my body. I sat there at the bottom of their bed, wondering what could have happened. And the only thing I could think of was sleepwalking. But this was different than any kind of sleepwalking I had ever done before. Usually when you sleepwalk, you have no recollection of this happening, or even remember it happened to begin with. But I remembered everything. I was conscious while doing it. I looked at my parents still sleeping and walked out of their room. I walked back into the living room and stared at the garage door. I was almost scared to open it because it all felt so real only a moment ago. I opened the door to the garage and stepped out, and I remembered this sinking feeling in my chest, like I'd swallowed many rocks. And when I turned the corner, everything was as it should be. There was no door. There was anything out of the ordinary that had happened. And I remembered being really confused. I sat on the couch for a long time thinking about it. And I have never had a sleepwalking incident quite like that. I don't know if I was even sleepwalking to begin with, or if I had dreamt the whole thing. Was that all part of a dream, or did I really sleepwalk while conscious? Maybe I was half asleep and wandered into the garage. Whatever the case, I still wonder what was behind that door, and why I was so scared. Story 4. My mom was never home. Now, after moving from my last house and into the house that I'm currently living in with my parents, it was quite a big change because we moved from the city back into the country. Now, I was no stranger to country living. We had lived in the country when I was very young and had visited family who lived in the country for quite some time. However, this would be my first time staying here for a longer extended period of time. I was honestly quite happy for the move, though a little disappointed since I'd have to leave any friends that I had back in the city that I lived in. It was also an inconvenience because I didn't yet have my driver's license, and going anywhere in the country, if you live in the country, you know it's pretty much impossible if you don't have a driver's license, because there's no bus to take you anywhere where I live. Now, I live on a farm, which is why we moved. My parents have goats, sheep, pigs, corgis, that kind of stuff. Chickens as well. And whenever somebody leaves, it's usually best for one of the family members to stay behind to watch the animals. Since I don't particularly like leaving the house because I have really bad anxiety, I usually offer to stay home alone myself, just to watch the animals and make sure nothing gets hurt while they're gone. So they had left, and I was staying home by myself. I was cleaning, I was singing, I was having a blast, just doing whatever I want home alone. If you've ever been home alone, you know how nice it can be. You get the whole house to yourself, you can play whatever kind of music, you can dance around in your underwear if you want, and no one can stop you. So I was dancing and cleaning in my house, doing whatever I can to pass the time. And I had walked into my bedroom to clean up some stuff and take it out. Now, I heard somebody call from in the living room, and I kind of ignored it because obviously no one's home. But then I heard them call again. It was my mom. It was a completely normal voice. There was nothing wrong with it. It wasn't distorted. It just sounded like my mom. I heard the door open and close and my mom's voice. So, of course, I thought my parents had come home. So I grabbed my stuff and ran into the living room to greet them as they came home. But there was no one there. I stood in the middle of the living room, looking around, and I even checked outside to see if maybe they had gone back outside. But there was no truck, no car, no parents, no brother, no one. And I was still home alone. Now, thinking maybe I had just imagined it, I hear voices sometimes, it's not a big deal. I think it's from trauma and my anxiety, but, that costs money to get taken care of. Anywho, I went back to cleaning thinking I had just imagined it or had a small audio hallucination, which can happen sometimes. Now, I went back to what I was doing, finishing cleaning, when I had walked back down the hallway and felt something touch the back of my neck. And all I remember hearing was my mother's voice on my ear, right behind me, as if she was standing right behind me. I dropped my stuff and turned around, and there was nothing there. It was just quiet, my music still playing in the background, but the sounds of birds, my dogs, the sheep, any sound that you would think would be on a farm disappeared. It sounded as if it was coming from right behind me. I remember being so freaked out, I checked every room in the house, locking all of the doors, shutting all the windows, and locking myself in my bedroom until my parents had gotten home. I told my mom about it, and she thought it was a pretty interesting story. You see, back at our old house, my mom would often hear the laugh of children in the background, even if there were no children, or see somebody sitting in a chair watching her as she slept. I wouldn't say I'm the most open to supernatural events, but I don't exactly disbelieve them either. I know these weren't exactly the most scary of stories, but these are just a few stories from my childhood that I remember really affected me growing up. For whatever reason, I've been scared of the dark, doorways, and voices ever since I can remember. It's one of the reasons I really got into creepypasta and the SCP Foundation. I always found it comforting to read stories that were similar to mine. Though, thinking back on it, some of these stories have a lot of correlations with certain things in the SCP Foundation and creepypastas. Like the Hat Man. I don't know if you guys know, but there is actually a creepypasta about a black figure wearing a top hat, very similar to the ones I described in one of my stories. that apparently a lot of people have seen. Similar to the kids with the black eyes, the black-eyed children, and even skinwalkers. I don't know what these stories mean. I just know that they creeped me out growing up, and I really wanted to share a creepy story from my childhood. These could have been better, but I don't remember a lot of the events that took place when I was a kid. I tend to kind of repress them, so thinking back on stuff is really hard for me sometimes. But yeah, if you have a scary story from your life that you'd like to share, please post it below. I would love to read some scary stories, or maybe even make a video based on them. Anyway, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell notification so you never miss out on my crazy content. I hope you guys have an amazing Halloween, and with that being said, I hope all your spooky wishes come true. See you guys next time. Bye bye.